Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome once again to ICB TV. I'm Garry, if you don't know already. And today, Wednesday, the 20th of May, sun beating down outside. So I know a lot of you are going to be looking at this later in the day. So if you're coming in at tea time, then I hope you had a great day. Otherwise, those of you who are gluttons for punishment and here live, we've got a very busy day for you today because I've got not one guest or two guests, I've got three guests today, believe it or not. So it's a day of anti-money laundering and all that includes. And I'm very pleased to say that I've got the head honcho himself, our Director of ML Compliance, Steve Hardwick. He is joined by our Intelligence and Investigations Officer, Jayne Hardwick. And just for good measure, we've got one of our investigation officer, Mike Jardine, who's actually just hot-footed it over from Surrey and Tyne and Wear. So, you know, never before has a man been able to do two live performances in such a far distant set of place. So, good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon.
Afternoon, Garry.
So, right from the start, I think the thing that we have to say is that we have a very high-powered anti-money laundering organisation, but stress that we're here to make sure that our members are doing things right. We're not there to catch them out. We're there to give them all of the tools to do their job properly, all of the knowledge that they need to do it within the new laws and the regulations as they are, or as they are amended from time to time, and really make them feel that they're doing a good job and they are professional bookkeepers. And Steve, that's really where we come at this from to begin with. This is how we started.
It is, yeah. I mean, the regulations are there. People have got to comply. But we, certainly with the COVID situation, we've taken a pragmatic view. We realise that members have been busy dealing with all the furlough issues and the company loans and all the different things and keeping business going. We have taken a little bit of a backseat. We've been doing desk-based reviews, but we've held off up to this point doing any AML compliance inspections. We did cease doing them pretty early on when the government guidance said that we should avoid unnecessary travel and unnecessary contact. With the lifting of the lockdown a little bit in the last couple of weeks, we've now decided that we'll start doing AML compliance inspections again, but we'll be doing them online. Zoom inspections. I think we did one last week. We've got a couple planned for this week and next week. So we are taking our first steps back into inspections, albeit with the small steps. And we are cognizant of the issues that are facing members at the moment. We are being pragmatic and trying to, you know, be helpful as much as we can. But we've still got a job on to make sure that people do comply even under these testing times. So, you know, it's two ways. We're looking at it even-handedly, trying to be sort of easygoing, but by the same token, we've still got to enforce the regulations and make sure that members are complying.
Yeah, and I think that we know and we understand that because of the lockdown and because of the problems that everybody has at the moment, there is a lot more what I would call crooked activity going on, or at least that's what I'm led to believe. So we have to be extra careful, and you know, we've got to make sure that we don't get taken in by people who are trying to do things wrong. I mean, I have to say, one of the biggest questions that we're getting from members at the moment is, my client is telling me they want to be furloughed, or they don't want to be furloughed, or they want to claim extra money, etc., etc. How do I tell them no? And it is difficult to tell our members exactly how to say no, but they just have to say no. They can't do something at the moment which is illegal or improper or even immoral. I mean, we are guardians of that sort of thing as supervised licensed bookkeepers, aren't we?
Well, yeah. I mean, if people are trying to claim grants and loans, and if they're furloughing people but they're still working, it's a form of money laundering. They're committing fraud. The proceeds of the fraud is money laundering activity, and they're required, if they're coming across this and they're spotting it and suspecting it, they're required to put a SAR in. I've just had a briefing this morning from the NCA in relation to the UKFIU's SAR reporting recent SAR activity. And again, the basic schemes, the government schemes is, you know, that the loans and bounce back loans, etc. You know, firms are sort of claiming this. They've got business accounts which have been dormant for months and months. They're actually claiming the loans, and then the banks are seeing the money drift away in cash withdrawals. Obvious fraud, obviously money laundering.
Yeah.
Similarly, there's other companies, you know, who are sort of maybe in the retail trade shops, who can't trade at the moment because of the lockdown. We are seeing instances of money still being deposited into business accounts which shouldn't be trading at the moment. So there's possibilities there that this could be fraudulent money or money laundering that's continuing to go through accounts, even though they're locked down and they shouldn't be trading at all. So these are things that bookkeepers maybe should be looking out for. The businesses who haven't been doing any trading, who are suddenly obtaining loans that they shouldn't be obtaining, they're all sort of red flags to be looking for when you're looking at your clients' activities through the lockdown.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned desk-based reviews, and obviously that, Jayne, is where you come in. You spend your days actually going through everybody's records on the database. You're ploughing through. I don't think you've got through everybody yet, but you're working your way through, and you're looking for what sort of things, and what are you finding that people are doing wrong on their records?
Well, mainly at the moment, I start off looking at their AML online. So I would say probably at least a third of practice license holders are not doing their AML online properly. Either they've not reviewed the clients within the last 12 months, or some have got no AML online at all. So if that's the case, you know, sometimes I will send an email if it's just one or two clients that they've not reviewed. If they've had a couple of emails before, they might get a phone call, or it might be a case of putting them through for an inspection. I'll have a look on the internet, see if there's any sign that people are trading, if they've got any more clients than what we think they have. People are just not generally updating their AML online. So other things I can look at, like I say, websites. I'll see if sometimes they've got a big snazzy website and you think, great, they might have 5 members of staff there. But when you look at our ICB records, we've still got them as one person working from the home address with 2 clients. You know, they need to keep us informed of what's happening. So as well, TCSP, the questionnaire that was sent out in 2018.
That's the Trusted Company Service Providers, yeah?
Yeah. So I want to make sure that they've given us the correct answers on there. Some have not even filled it in. So I'll look at Companies House as well, make sure that if they say they aren't doing TCSP work, that there aren't a lot of companies registered to their practice address, which does happen quite often. Companies House as well, we need to check the entity, make sure that if they've told us that they are a sole trader, they are still a sole trader and they've not changed to a limited company. Obviously, if they've changed to a limited company, then they're breaking the regulations and they're trading illegally. So look at Companies House, and also on Companies House, I'll be looking to see who the officers of the company are, so directors, secretaries, shareholders. I find one of the biggest problems is that, say a husband or a wife is a director, maybe they weren't a director at the start when they came on board with ICB, but they've now become a director or a secretary, and they're not telling ICB. So we don't have a DBS, the basic disclosure for them. So again, that's quite a big problem that we need to get through to members. If you've got somebody that's a director or a boom, should I say, we need to know about them and we need a DBS.
So yeah. I think a lot of our members believe that a boom is somebody actually working in the business. So just so those of you who don't know, that's a business owner, officer or manager, somebody who's important to the business. It's not only the people who are actually owning the business, but also those people who are taking a significant role in the management of the business. It's, you know, it's the word control, I think. And we come across a lot of members. I've been speaking to 2 within the last couple of days and said, yeah, my husband owns half the business, but he's nothing to do with the business really. Well, he does, because he owns half the business, you know, and that's the important thing. It's not that they are or are not a bookkeeper, it's their ownership. Because if anything happens to our bookkeeper that owns half the business, then the other person then owns the business. You know, we have to make sure that there's continuity, etc. And I think sometimes our members miss that. Do you find that they're sort of incredible, but they've got to mention their partner?
Yeah, they do say, well, they're not working in the company, so. And quite often, you know, if they are on the on their records on ICB, and they're just not updating who they are. They might have been an employee, but they've suddenly changed to a director. So staff details need reviewing. Quite often they're not reviewed. Again, I'll look at the ratio, the staff-client ratio. So if we've got 2 members of staff on our records, but you see they've got 100 clients, then the staff records there must be more staff on there, and similarly the other way around. And again, on websites, if you see they've got hundreds of testimonials, I mean, like I say, sometimes we really don't know the clients. They're not updating us enough. I don't know whether they're naive or they just forget that we need to know all these things.
When you think about the DBS stuff, Gary, and the booms, the Regulation 26 is all about keeping the bad guys out of the accountancy profession. It's making sure that we understand who owns an accountancy practice. And criminals like to be anonymous. They like to hide in the background, lurking in the background, putting somebody else up as being the owner of the company. So it's important that we understand the ownership and control structure of all our members, all our member practices, to make sure that there's no criminals lurking in the background, pulling the strings, and actually controlling a bookkeeping practice. So that's all about Regulation 26. And the husband might be a plumber, a joiner. If he's a boom, he's a beneficial owner of a practice, we still need a DBS to make sure that he hasn't got any of the convictions specified in Schedule 3 to the money laundering regulation. So it's really important that we understand who all the booms are. And it's important also, I mean, quite often a member will appoint a director in a company, they'll appoint a new director and inform us later, well, the regulations state that they must seek ICB approval, they must seek the approval of their professional body supervisor, the AML regulator, before they appoint a director or anybody who's a boom in a practice. So it's, you know, it's really important we put that message across so that we can make sure that only people who are fit and proper become a beneficial owner, officer or a manager in an ICB bookkeeping practice.
And I think if people look at it that we expect them to do this for their clients, we have to do the same because they are technically our clients. Our members are our clients, and we have to report back to OPBAS, Office for Professional Body, AML supervisors, supervisory bodies, professional bodies. And they ask us the same sort of questions that we ask of our members. You know, who owns that business of that client that you have? How do you know that? Are they giving you all of the information? And if people aren't giving you information, you are supposed to treat your clients as a little bit suspicious. You know, you put them on a higher risk rating. So we have to do the same, because at the end of the day, as you say, what we're trying to do is get rid of all the bad guys and make sure that I'm not just a bookkeeper, I'm an IC bookkeeper, means something, and that's important. But Mike, I saw you recently down before we were all locked down at the Avon branch meeting, and you were telling me that some of our members have some rather strange excuses why they're not up to date.
They do, yes. I've started compiling a list of excuses given to myself and other inspectors, and the range. I'll go through a few of them. I don't have time for all this AML stuff. I've been too busy to keep on top of my AML. I've got clients to look after. Well, I'm afraid if you don't keep up with your AML, you won't have clients for much longer. This has been a wake-up call for me. I've not been doing it, but it's been a wake-up call. Money laundering doesn't happen to people like me. Well, surprise, surprise, it happens to everybody, or can happen to everybody. Criminals don't use small bookkeepers like me. That's one that's I regularly get. But you'll find that a lot of criminals will target the smaller bookkeeper because they feel as though they're underneath the radar. I've known my clients for years and they wouldn't do that, which I then provide them with an example of how that isn't always the case. I didn't know I had to do it, which again I find hard to believe with all the emails that goes out from ICB and all the stuff on the ICB website. But then I never get surprised when people don't actually know how to log on to the ICB website with their password. They've not used it for some considerable time, so that's probably why they don't know. I knew I hadn't done it, but I thought I'd wait for the inspection so you could tell me what to do. Which is one that's I've had recently, and the one that concerned me most was what are the chances of being inspected anyway. Well,
right,
and I'm trying to get across to people that, you know, it's not a case of just satisfying the inspector. You're trying to make sure, and we're trying to help you stay within the law, so that you don't fall foul of it and ultimately potentially lose your livelihood and your reputation.
Yeah, you're getting a bit like Jasper Carroll. I don't know if anybody's old enough to remember Jasper Carroll. He always used to come out with these excuses used on insurance forms. Remember that?
It might be the haircut.
Right. Yeah. Well, we seem to be buying them in pairs here. You know, you and Steve both have, you know, with the short hair here. Mine's getting longer by the minute. I think I can almost feel it growing nowadays. So we obviously, Steve, you and I know because I've been involved with ICB's AML right since the beginning. I mean, I was lobbying for it originally, and then we got involved, etc., and I see a lot of the stuff that you get that gets fired at you from OPBAS and Treasury and HMRC and everybody else. They're starting to put pressure on us to make sure we're doing it right. And my latest information, those of you who read my article in last week's newsletter will see the report from RUSI, Royal United Services Institute, saying that OPBAS has now not just got to do a good job, it's got to be seen to be doing a good job. So, Steve, I think we can expect a few more sanctions and a few more heavy questions.
Yeah, OPBAS are flexing the muscles again. I think in January this year, a number of professional bodies were hauled before the Treasury and told in no uncertain terms that they had to up their game and put more resources and put more effort into the AML supervision of their members. ICB wasn't one of those who were dragged in front of the Treasury, which I take comfort from. I think we're doing a pretty good job. In fact, we had a catch-up call with OPBAS last Friday afternoon, where they reviewed our current strategy, our current what we're currently undertaking, and our policy and procedures. And at the moment, we seem to be satisfying all the requirements that they put on us. But the current agenda has been driven really through the government's economic crime plan, and that's a 3-year plan that goes from 2019 to 2022, which is a result of the Financial Action Task Force Mutual Evaluation Report of the UK's AML landscape, which took place a couple of years ago. Now, the Financial Action Task Force are the intergovernmental body that sort of coordinates the fight against money laundering and terrorist financing around the world. They had a generally positive view of the UK's AML regime, but one of the negative parts of it was the professional body supervisors supervising their members' AML compliance. We were sort of dragged through the hedge quite a lot. We got some criticism, and that's one of the reasons why the government has brought up the economic crime plan. It's 7 strategic priorities and 52 action points, and it's all down to really making a real effort to eradicate economic crime throughout the UK. There's the different strands of activity. We're involved in one of them. I think it's number 6, priority 6. So it's 5. Risk-based supervision and risk management. Yeah. And it's all about what they call professional enablers. And they're the accountants, solicitors, etc., who law enforcement say facilitate money laundering through their practices, through working with the clients, through the clients' businesses, and they see that a lot of the, as they call them, professional enablers are complicit, sort of in cahoots with criminals, but also people who are negligent, unwitting facilitators of money laundering, people who don't take their AML seriously. And I think that's one of the main areas that I see as a big problem for ICB. Going back to Mike's excuses a few moments ago, and that's what we're coming across. Jayne's finding it going through the records. 1/3 of the members she looked at recently haven't kept up with their AML online. And these are the sorts of things that OPBAS are looking for us to sort of step down on it and really stamp our mark onto the members who won't or who don't comply with the legislation. And that's where OPBAS are coming from. It's all driven from the government and the Treasury. You mentioned the RUSI report. People like Transparency International, which again, another international pressure group, looking at the state of the UK supervisory regime. And they will be looking closely at the professional body annual reports. Under the 5th directive, each professional body's got to put an annual report out every year on the supervisory activity that they undertake. And they'll be looking closely at what we're doing with our members. And if we're seen not to be being robust enough and not to be supervising effectively, I'm sure there'll be some press coverage saying that ICB aren't doing the work properly. So, we've really got to be on our ball here. We've really got to make sure that ICB members are taking AML seriously. They are doing what they're supposed to be doing, keeping up with the regulations, and also keeping up with ICB rules. Jayne's mentioned earlier about people not updated about staff members, about the levels of clients they've got. All these. As a supervisor, we have got to build an AML risk profile of each of our practices. Now, we build our risk profiles from their AML online presence and the other behind the scenes stuff on Sodalys, which is the behind the scenes stuff from AML online with all the membership details. We need to know how many staff they've got, how many clients they've got, how many high risk, medium risk, low risk clients they've got, so we can build a proper AML risk profile of them all. And people who aren't doing this are sort of letting us down because we can't do our risk profiles properly and letting themselves down by not keeping up. So it's really important that people do these things because this is what OPBAS are looking for. The next round of OPBAS activity will be coming to ICB, probably on site, and they'll be going through our policies and procedures, systems and controls, and making sure that what we've got in place is sufficient, but it's also working. They will be asking to look at member profiles and member records on AML Online, and where they see, if they come across a lack of activity, lack of people doing what they should be doing, they'll be stamping down on us for not supervising effectively. So it's really important that people get the message and really take it seriously.
Yeah, so I mean, there's two parts of it as far as our members are concerned. One, that they are doing everything correct as far as enacting the rules and regulations for us to see, but then actually understanding their clients, understanding the whole process of money laundering, what it's about, what it can look like, who can get involved with it. I must admit, I stand up on stage at conference every year and I say, we've got a wonderful bunch of members, you're all brilliant, we love you to death, you do all your stuff, you're not just bookkeepers, you're ICB bookkeepers. I've been a little bit shocked that some of our key players, if I can call them that, actually have been a bit lax when we've come down to it. They forgot to tell us things. So we've just got to keep this message constant so that they don't slip up. It sometimes comes across as a little bit heavy, but it's because we're repeating it. But I think we've got to keep repeating it. And I think the other thing that we also have to take into account is that every week we register about 15 new practices. So they've never heard this before. So we've got to go over it to them. We've got to start from scratch with them. And sometimes there is a bit of repetition, there's a bit of duplication, but judging by the number of people who have, not exactly gone AWOL, but they've strayed a little bit over the line, they need to be reminded repeatedly. That's really where Jayne has been coming in, because we've now got somebody whose job it is to look at these records and not just look at the people that we know something is wrong, but look at the people we think have got it right and just check everything out. So I think it's just the next step forward in our evolution. And just for everybody listening to know that Steve, as our Director of AML Compliance, has a seat on our main governing board. He is not exactly autonomous, but he has a lot of power on that board because he is there to protect you and us against basically OPBAS and work with the law and the regulation. And it's part of our agreement with Opbas that Steve he can come to us and tell us we're doing things wrong. I mean, he can give us a rap over the knuckles and demand that he has another pot of money. He does this quite regularly, but, you know, because he wants to improve AML online. And, you know, he's taking the feedback from you and saying, right, Garry, I want this, I want that. And he goes back to the board. So it's a powerful position, but it's actually, for ICB, I think it's one of the most important things that we do, because we qualify you, we get you up to a certain level. We can't then just leave you to your own devices and let you out to get yourself into any sort of difficulty. So that's our job. We're here to teach. We're here to protect. Unfortunately, as Mike will know, you know, he is sent into people who normally totally ignored stuff and just got on with it. I mean, Mike, you've all been in the police force. I mean, that's why we've got you there. You know, you've all retired out of the force now, but we picked you purely because I just feel that you get a sense for something when you first see it. So, Mike, when you walk into somebody's office, presumably, is it the 30-second rule? Like when you're interviewing somebody, you've got a really good idea almost immediately?
Very much so. I usually get that when I first make the first phone call to them to say I'm coming to an inspection. But when you walk in, you weigh up people, and I would say majority of people are absolutely fantastic, and they realise I'm not there with a big stick to shake at them, but I'm there to help them to get them compliant and show them the way to go and get them back on the straight and narrow if they're not already on it. The one thing that does amaze me is that when I do contact them by the telephone and say, I'm coming to see you and we're going to be examining your AML, a lot of people don't make the effort to try and get it in some sort of shape before I get there, waiting for me to go there. But then I get the excuses of not knowing what they should do, which, as I say, I find very hard to believe with all the emails and publicity that is provided by the ICB. But it's, as I say, I've not yet come across anybody that's been malicious in what their lack of activity. It's always through naivety or lack of time, and they're all willing to get up to speed as best they can. And 99% of people, once they're told where they've gone wrong, they'll get up to speed and become compliant, which is good.
So when you go into an inspection, you can either find somebody compliant, which is great, thumbs up.
Yeah.
Generally compliant, which means they've got a great idea, you know, they know what they're on about, but they've slipped up in a few areas. And then there's non-compliant, and that's really means that they're really not giving it a good go at all.
That's right, yes. Yeah,
so if they're generally compliant, we go back and see them again. We put them on some sort of plan. Is that right? Or is it?
Yeah, I'll sit down with them, explain to them what they need to do to become compliant. Give them documentation outlining that. Decide between them how long it's going to get them to become compliant. There's no point in me setting an action plan for completion if it's going to be not achievable. So set that action plan, and then if they're generally compliant, they'll then contact me when they are compliant to confirm that they have completed that action plan, and if required, send me proof of that.
Right. So Jayne, I gather once somebody knows that they're about to have an inspection, you've obviously done all of the research up until that point. Between them notified of the day of the inspection and the actual inspection, a lot of people try a very quick catch-up. Is that right?
Yeah, I would say probably the majority. Yeah, you find that you see the day that the inspector's giving them a call, and within the next couple of days, suddenly their AML's bang up to date. They've found a few more customers that they somehow had forgotten about. So yes.
3 members of staff in a boom all come out of nowhere. Oh, I've forgotten them. Yeah,
that's right. Yeah.
And under our new regime, which is, as Steve has said, prompted by Opbas, your compliance is as of the day that you were informed there was going to be an inspection, not on the day we get there when you've turned the entire world upside down and suddenly become compliant. Is that right, Steve?
That's right, yeah, Garry. I mean, we have people who we select for inspection. They may have, 5 or 6 clients on AML online. They haven't been reviewed in 5, 6 years. And suddenly, as soon as they get the telephone call to say we're coming to inspect you, they've got 40 or 50 clients onto AML online, and 3 or 4 members of staff added. Well, that's really not good enough. A client risk assessment is a real major part of your AML compliance. It's risk assessing your clients and understanding your clients is one of the major things to do. So it's not good enough to do them, just before the inspection, just because you've been told of an inspection. It's an ongoing process, and it needs to be completed ongoing. It must be going all the time. One of the other issues we have is with members when they lower the risk rating from high to low, and they don't give us a really good reason for it. They might quite often say, well, I've known this client 20 years, and which bears it doesn't tell you anything, that, and it's no reason to lower somebody's AML risk. And I think I mentioned this at the Inspire Tour input that I did, and I got 1 or 2 comments from some members that they didn't really understand that when they were lowering the risk, what they were actually doing. And when you're doing an AML risk assessment, you're answering questions, and all the questions in the risk assessment template are the red flags. The red flags, if you tick, the wrong answer, you're identifying possibly, behaviour that would indicate there's going to be money laundering taking place. So if you hit a red flag, you should really be looking at that client quite seriously and not just simply lowering the risk to low. Some members seem to think that it's just learn the character. How could I possibly have a high risk client? Well, there are high risk clients because you've hit a flag, you've hit a red flag on the system, and that's why it's been come out as a high risk. And all it means is that you've got to take extra special care when you're dealing with your AML compliance with that particular customer. Don't try and lower the risk and just because you can't believe that you've got a high risk client. And I give the example that if you've lowered the risk from somebody from high risk to low risk, and that customer of yours becomes involved in a police investigation for money laundering, fraud, etc., the police are going to want to know on what basis that you've lowered that risk from high to low. And if all you can say is that, well, I've known him for 10 years, that's not a really good reason. And law enforcement aren't going to be very happy at the stance that you take. And it could lead to you facing action as a member alongside the customer who's involved in criminality. So really think about lowering the risk seriously before you do so, because that risk assessment is your protection should things go wrong in a police investigation or something. So it really is important that you think carefully and you can properly satisfy us, because we will, if we see these things, we'll be ringing you, and they are part of the inspection, wanting to know why you've lowered the risk. So it really is, it's for your protection to look at the risk rating properly and maintain it unless you've got good valid reasons.
On the converse of that, of course, you can't just put everybody as a high risk, because that makes you look good as if you're looking after everybody. It is supposed to be a proper judgment of what you think the risk is. And if you've got high risk clients, I always say this, it doesn't mean they're crooks. It means that at the moment you don't know enough about them. It could mean that you don't know enough about them to be able to give them a lower risk, a medium risk or a low risk. Or it could mean that you think there's something wrong and you're putting in a SAR or something else, or whatever activity is being taken. But it's got to be realistic. Exactly the same as low risk, because like you say. And Mike, when you go out to see people, do you find people have got a good idea of risk, or is there something that they're lacking?
It's definitely something that they're lacking, and I see the inspection as an opportunity as well to educate people on that risk, and to understand what risk is, and that you can't mitigate risk until you know what the actual risk is. And I think I find that with a lot of people, they say, oh, well, they're not. My client's not a risk. Well, why isn't your client a risk? And they'll come up with what Steve says there. Well, I've known him for 10 years. Well, what else do you know? Well, I don't. And they don't understand the concept of risk, and you've got to understand that before you can put things in place to mitigate it. So I do see my role as well as an educational role, and to try and I've had some good feedback from that's assisted them going forward.
Yeah, and under the the system that we have at the moment, there are 3 levels of disclosure, if you like. If somebody tells you, I think you say, don't you, when you go straight in, have you got anything you need to tell me? Or Jayne will do the same. If somebody before that happens rings us up and says, oh, by the way, I haven't done so, I have forgot to tell you something, I haven't done this, then that is an unprompted disclosure. If it gets to the point that either Jayne is ringing you up or Michael or one of the other inspectors is knocking on your door and saying, we think, do you need to tell us something? It normally means you know something that they haven't told you, in which case that's an unprompted, a prompted disclosure. And then we've got the occasional people who try very hard to convince us that there isn't actually anything hidden at all. And we always find out that we know what we're doing. So, or you know what you're doing. You've been doing this for a few years, I think, all of you. So that comes out. And I think that's very important. If you know now that there's something wrong with your practice information that we don't know about, rather than think we won't find out, you've got to start telling us, because at the moment, if you tell us you've forgotten to do something, that's one thing. But if we find out that you haven't told us something, it just escalates it. And we start then to have doubts about other things that you might be doing. So just be very careful to make sure we know everything. So the big thing really, Steve, that we've been working on for a little while, since OPBAS have brought in their slightly heavier regime, is fines. And we have been told that at the moment we're not being severe enough with the people who do things wrong. We're sort of almost slapping their wrists, and that's not going to be allowed in the future. The whole group of accounting and solicitor bodies have been told that we've got to work together to have some sort of commonality of approach, but we have to find people. Not always palatable for our members. It makes us look a bit hard on them, but it's something that is now demanded of us, isn't it?
It is, yeah. I mean, what the money launderers say, we should take enforcement action to seek to remove the benefits of non-compliance and deter future non-compliance of our members. And we've got to be seen to be taking action. Like I say, at the end of the year, we have to publish our annual report, and it'll have to be published. It'll be a public document, and there will be interested parties out there looking at what ICB are doing, where they find members who are non-compliant with the ML responsibilities and the requirements. And they'll be looking to see what ICB are doing and seeing if we are taking appropriate, proportionate action, in line with the other supervisors. So we've really got to try and work with those supervisors or on a similar level to other supervisors to make sure that our sanctions are proportionate. I think at the moment, they were a little bit under par. So we've had to raise them to bring them to the levels of other supervisory bodies to make sure that we're being consistent across the sector. ICB can't be seen to be too lenient with its members when you look at what HMRC and the other professional bodies are charging members for non-compliance. So we really got to be a consistent approach and something that satisfies OPBAS, the Treasury, and of course the interested parties such as Transparency International, who are looking closely at what professional bodies are doing to make sure that we plug in that gap that the FATF Mutual Evaluation Report identified as being a weakness in the UK's regime.
Yeah, and I think I think it's one of the concerns that that FATF had, Financial Action Task Force had, as you mentioned before, that as professional bodies, we were more interested in maintaining our subscriptions and looking after our members than doing the job properly. So we're almost having to go a little bit too far the other way, just to prove now that we are doing it properly. And next month, the newsletter next month, we'll see the first list of names being published of people who have been fined, members who have been fined. There'll be an expulsion that's mentioned. And it's been a bit of an eye opener, I have to say. As I've said, when I've stood up in the past and said what a wonderful group of members we've got, I absolutely meant it, and I still do. But I just think that people are hiding under the ICB banner a little bit and presuming that because they're under ICB they get away with murder. But and one of the things that I highlighted in my article in last month's newsletter was that we had to change our rules. And this was actually, although we weren't mentioned as such, I mean, the system, our rules, I think, were mentioned in the last year's OPVAS report, because under our normal professional conduct regulations, we have to give everybody 21 days notice of a hearing. We have to call them to a hearing. They can then go away and come back with further information, etc., etc. And OPVAS have said quite strongly to us, no, if somebody hasn't followed the money laundering regulations, there is no excuse. They've done it wrong. They should be disciplined in some way. You can't treat it in the same way. So we have rewritten the rules, and those rules will be up. They're already out, but we'll be publishing them properly with explanations and everything else. All the fines that will be linked into AML discretions are immediate. Now, the comeback is that you can, if you wish, tell us that we've over-fined you, but you can't turn around and say, well, actually, I wasn't guilty. Because when Mike goes to an inspection and you are given a list of things that you've done wrong, you agree to it on site, and that is it, basically. You have committed a breach, and the failure that leads to that breach results in a fine, a penalty, and at very worst, suspension or expulsion altogether. So, you know, it is tough out there, but, you know, we're all grown-ups, and it is a nasty world out there, and we've got to make sure that we do better at this. I mean, Jayne, a lot of the stuff that you're finding out, again, is it's going to result in immediate fines, because if they forgot to give us a boom, that's it, isn't it, really? They can't argue. It's done and dusted.
Exactly, yeah.
I mean, the fact that you've got to seek approval before you appoint a boom, Garry, is a really important issue here. You know, people who aren't doing that are breaching the money laundering regulation straight away. You know, and it's an important breach, because say Regulation 26 is all about keeping the bad guys out of the profession. I'm not saying that the members have got, you know, bad people and they're appointing bad people, but we need to make sure that the people that do come to own an ICB bookkeeping practice, you know, beneficial owner, we need to make sure that these people are squeaky clean. The pass the fit and proper test to become a beneficial owner of an ICB practice, and it's really important that we get this information through the DBS certificate prior to anybody being appointed. It really is important, that.
Because I think it's worth stressing that the money laundering regulations are not our regulations. They are the country's regulations. Government has put the regulations through. They've been through Parliament. I mean, ICB is named in a parliamentary regulation as a supervisor. And that's what we have to do. And if we don't do our job properly, we lose that right. And, you know, it would be a disaster for ICB if we were to have our supervisory status taken away, and it would be a disaster for our members. So the relatively small number of members who are doing things completely wrong have got to be taken to task to protect you all, to protect your livelihoods as well as protect the Institute, and make sure that we maintain that right to be your supervisor, rather than you being handed over to HMRC or Treasury or whoever it might be to look after you. So it's coming up. I've got a few questions coming in. I think we'll look at some of these. Lucy Brown says, if we use a subcontractor for an ad hoc project, do we need to inform ICB? Yes.
We also need to make sure, Garry, that they've got supervisions, that they're supervised under themselves, of course.
Yeah. Yeah. And also, under the regulations, there's a very strong onus now put upon the practice owner to make sure that the people that they use within that practice are fit for purpose. They've got to be qualified, or, you know, you've got to be happy that they are good enough to do the job that you're giving them to do, because otherwise you will be held responsible. If they make a mess of something in court, you will be asked, well, why did you do this? Because this person isn't qualified. Did you check them out? You know, and that sort of thing. So, yeah, you've got to be very careful.
Yeah, sorry, Garry, that's internal controls. Regulation 21 says that you've got to make sure that any staff that you employ, as you said, are qualified to do the role, but they're also people of integrity. I mean, we're not suggesting that you have to get a DBS on all your staff, but you really need to make sure that that the persons you're employing have got good conduct and good integrity, and they're above board and they're not criminals, you know, to make sure that you employ decent people.
Right. Now, Lucy, just a follow-up. Is there anywhere we can view the TCSP that we sent in several years ago now? If things change, what do we do to update? We will have a list. You are either a TCSP or you're not. There were, I think, was it 5 questions, Steve? Something like that. The best thing to do is call our compliance people, either professional standards or ring the normal number 0203 405 4000 and ask for the compliance department. You'll speak to Amy Church normally, and she will tell you what you said and make sure it's right. We do have to have that right, because that list doesn't stay with us. Every month, Steve, or actually Amy, sends that across to HMRC, and they look on their master list to make sure that you're on there and that they don't know something that we don't. That's right, isn't it, Steve?
Yeah, also law enforcement have got access to the list as well. All the police forces, HMRC, National Crime Agency, all have access to the TCSP register. And if they're looking at people who are forming companies for criminals or acting as registered office, etc., they'll be looking to make sure that the person who's done all these activities is actually on the TCSP list. And if you're not on the TCSP list and you are acting, forming companies, acting as registered office, again, you're breaching the regulations. So it's a criminal offence. You know, it's as simple as that, and you could be found wanting, and the police could be knocking at your door.
Yeah, I've got one for somebody anonymous. Obviously, if you don't want me to mention your name, if you come on as anonymous, otherwise I'll mention your name, because if I don't, people shout and say you didn't mention me. As a new practice license holder, is there a tick list you can follow to ensure you complete all the records? Well, there are various tick lists on the website under My ICB and running your practice, but actually the AML online, if you work with that properly, it asks you everything you need to know.
There's a guidance document on the website, Gary. I see the new guidance document, which takes you through right from doing your practice risk assessment with the risk assessment template there and the sample template which you need to complete. Talks you through your internal controls and your policies and procedures, what you need to do in respect of training, what you need to do in respect of due diligence and record keeping. So it takes you right through. It's on the ICB website under AML guidance. It takes you A to Z through everything that you need to do to comply with ICB rules and the money laundering regulations.
Now, there's a lot of information on there. If you can't find it, then again, give a call to the compliance department and somebody will talk it through with you. We want to make sure you get it right. What we're talking about today is not intended to frighten anybody off going into practice. It's just to make everybody realise that as a professional, you have to follow the rules, and anything that we can do to help you with that, we will. Karen says, would you say that risk can be difficult and confusing because of personal understanding, values, and ethics? What about you, Mike? Have you found that people don't understand values and ethics that we expect from them, or is it not that simple?
Yeah, I don't find people that don't understand that. I think it's the idea of how they apply risk to the money laundering, and like you said, there's so much information on the ICB site there, which Steve mentioned before, and yourself mentioned, and it's applying that risk to the money laundering and the red flags. All the information is there. As I said before, happy to speak and talk anybody through it that needs to go through it.
There's also another document on the website, Gary, outlining what the current risks that we see as a professional, as an ICB supervisor, what we see, which we think could affect ICB members. It talks about TCSP services, false accounting, various different things. There's also a long list of red flags. Talks about geographic risk, etc. So it's on the ICB website. I think it might be under the risk assessment tab. So there's information there, really to guide members on what we consider to be the risks. At this moment in time, the government's preparing the National Risk Assessment on Money Laundering and Terrorist Financing, which is the new one's due to come out in July this year, where they're going to update the current guidance. So we'll be updating the document when we get the new National Risk Assessment. and also with some recent developments that we've come across. So that document's a living document. It's useful for members to keep refreshing the memory, to see what risks that we think is out there. But then again, they can always email in and tell us what risks they think that we might need to address as well. So it's a two-way street. You know, we're giving them information, but we can also take information back and recycle it to other members who might not know about these things.
Yeah, I mean, it's a constant learning curve, isn't it? Yeah. Andy says, can a member ask for an inspection for peace of mind? Andy, yes, you can do, but obviously that there is a cost to that, so you need to speak to us. I mean, the normal cost for somebody who is forced to have a second inspection is well, it's going to be £500 plus expenses, but that's what you have to pay. But that's because you've done something wrong. I'll talk to Steve afterwards and see. The thing is that our inspectors are going to be pretty busy as soon as we come out of lockdown. So wanting to do these, I'm sure we could probably do something. We could certainly set Jayne on you for a while and let's see what she can find out. And we need to look at that as well. The problem is that if we find something wrong, the fact that you were very nice in asking us to come and find something wrong isn't going to get you off the hook, really, because you're still wrong. So what we don't want is everybody that knows something's wrong who suddenly says, oh, well, come and inspect me and I'll get it right. You know, that isn't how it works. Karen asked a pretty good question here. Where do the fines go? Well, actually, Karen, at the moment, there haven't been any fines. So it hasn't been going anywhere yet. But it will go into ICB. It will go into the anti-money laundering unit to help pay for us to do more inspections, etc. I mean, the unit itself is quite expensive. I might be saying wrong, but I think it's certainly close to $250,000, I believe, in total, and that's totally funded out of your practice license fees and various other things, and plus some. But that's just something we have to do. But if there are going to be fines, then that will go to ICB. Now, I can hear what, because I know you bookkeepers, what you'll be saying is, well, that means you can just bump a fine on everybody and it'll boost the coffers of ICB. Well, we're going to guard against that because Jayne will pick the people who need to go to be inspected. Steve will then either inspect or instruct one of the inspectors to go and do it. We will then get the report to ICB. ICB will have a unit specifically there to make sure that the fines are proper, and we will have an outside body which will be appointed very shortly to keep an overarching view of ICB to make sure that we're not making a profit from this, and what we're doing is doing the job properly of making a fine something which stops you wanting really to get to the situation where you can be fined, and there is no way that this is a commercial decision for ICB other than where we put you to cover the costs. Just to give you an idea, ICAW, which is obviously a very large organisation, last year they brought in £10.3 million worth in fines. Now, those of you who work with accountants, I know what you're saying. Yeah, they deserve it. Oh, sorry, I'm being political again, but never mind. Right, now, this is the Donald. Oh, okay. I started my practice on the 1st of April, and I'm very keen to get everything right, but I have found setting up my business to be more challenging than I expected. I'm still trying to be certain that I've got everything in place, especially for GDPR and AML. I think it would be really helpful, stresses the really, if you could run some workshops or webinars just for newbies, or give people like me an appropriate forum to ask questions and check things out, and also feedback to you. It would also give you an opportunity to get to know some of your newer members, and for us an opportunity to start building a network of contacts of people at the same stage as us. Well, quite a long question there, but actually everything that you want already exists. We now need to tell you how to find it because we obviously haven't done that properly. I mean, Mike, you've just come off another webinar. You said, I think, 2.5 hours with a branch meeting where you've been talking about AML inspections. Is that right?
Yes, that's right. It was a joint branch meeting with Oxford and Tyne and Wear.
And that was for everybody who wanted to just log into that, and you started right at the beginning and talking about what you're doing in inspection, what you're looking for, everything.
Yeah, it was from start to finish, what the legislation says, how it impacts on an ICB bookkeeper, what I'm looking for, what I would expect when I go on an inspection, and what the member can expect on an inspection. A couple of stated cases when things go wrong for bookkeepers and bookkeeping staff, and a question and answer session similar to this at the end.
And Steve, I mean, you've done the last, what, 3 conferences, and you've done a lot of presentations yourself when, in the old days when we used to face-to-face branch meetings.
Yeah, we did the Inspire tour last year. I mean, we did, how many centres? 15 centres. We did the summit. We've done branch meetings. We did the online Inspire tour this year. And again, there's branch meetings coming up. So yeah, we're out there, we're visible. But if people have got specific questions, they can always just email into the professional standards mailbox, and we'll contact them. I can sit and chat to people if necessary. We can give them information. We can point them in the right direction. You know, but we're here to help. You know, that's what we're here to do. We're trying to get members to be compliant. We'll answer questions. There's plenty of information on the website, but you know, we can supplement it. We maybe could be looking at a frequently asked questions document and things like that, which we can keep moving along. And you know, there's lots of things we're doing, but you know, if we need to do more, we will do more.
I mean, there's a lot of archive stuff on the web, but on our website. But I think the thing is, because we're involved with things like Treasury and HMRC, I mean, they just churn out pages and pages and pages of information. So yeah, we've always tried to trace it. And Steve does a lot of columns in the newsletter, for example, and they can be found in archives. You know, you can go on and go to the newsletter and look into the archive. It'll say AML normally, or money laundering, something like that in the title. You can find those. But if there is something that, yeah, I'll look at this. We have a communications team that are constantly working on these things, and it is, as I say, we have about 15 or more people each week registering in your practice. If it's something that we need to do to signpost things, then yeah, we need to do it. I know they are working on a document which at the moment will become some sort of online leaflet, which is a praise seed version. We have to, there's a very fine line between giving you a praise seed version that you read and then read nothing else, and a praise seed version which prompts you to read other things, which are a bit more information when you need to. But we will we'll see how that goes. Karen has just clarified what she said before. It's more understanding risk than values and ethics versus personal ethics. Yeah, I mean, I think it comes down to what we've just been talking about to the Donald. Yeah, it is difficult to understand risk. I fully appreciate that, which is why we think the AML line online, if you answer the questions properly, certainly gives you a pointer, but it's not the be all and end all. At the end of the day, it is down to you, but you will get that with experience. And I know we've, Lucy Brown's been asking a couple of things on here. I mean, Lucy Brown is a member of our council. If it is the same Lucy Brown, I think we've got a couple of them, but if it is the same Lucy Brown. Now, she is particularly keen on making sure that the members in her branch, which is over in Lincolnshire, get things right. And I know that a couple of, she and one other member of her branch sort of did a mini inspection on themselves just to try and see how the other person thought they were doing, see if they were getting it right. Something like that works. But really, the branch network is one of your first ports of call, because people will talk to you, giving you real life experiences. I mean, I've always said this, and I know it's extremely sexist, and I do apologise to our members who are men, but the women, normally you've got a third sense for this sort of stuff, and if you think it doesn't feel right, it normally doesn't. So I think you've got to work with that. If it doesn't feel right, dig deeper to prove that you are right in it being wrong, or at least you'll allay your fears by proving that your fears were unwarranted. But you've just got to keep digging. And we've said so many times before, put your client into Google, put the company into Google, put them into various search engines, have a look what they do on LinkedIn, what do they do on Twitter, you know, because if they're boasting about their company going from 1 million to 2 million turnover and you're not seeing it in the books and all this sort of stuff, it's all those little things that just tick off a box at a time.
Gary, it's when you're looking. It's when you're looking at your due diligence, and it's the, we've got in the police used to call it the 5WH. Who's your clients? Who are they? What do they do? Where do they do it? Why do they do it? When do they do it? How do they do it? Asking all these questions, and you really get to know your clients are, and really get to the nitty gritty, really get underneath them, and and establish some kind of knowing what they do. And that's once you know these things, it's easy to establish risk and where the risks are, because things about if the business is being run as you expect it to be run, you're on the right track. But if things are going differently, ask the questions.
Yeah, I mean, Mike mentioned earlier that people think, well, I'm a bookkeeper, so nobody's going to come to me if they're a crook, but yes, they do. And I mean, the thing you've got to realise is that the government is slowly cracking down on every loophole, and so people are being squeezed into corners, and they're trying to find a way of putting money, washing it, which is where money laundering comes from. So if you've got a business that's got a nice turnover and it's got invoices coming in, it goes into the bank, etc., etc. Okay, but you've got to look and make sure those invoices are proper, because it could be that there actually is no business out there, and the money that's coming into the bank is, some crook down the road who's been selling drugs and needs to pass his money over somewhere. So you put it through a legitimate business. Sorry, not a legitimate. You put it through a dodgy business. Then they pay their tax, they pay their VAT, but everything that's left then is magically washed and cleaned, and it goes back out onto the street. Now, if they then can pick up a nice bookkeeper who will give them a tick and put the tax returns in for them, that's somebody helping them, and it makes them look even better. And it does happen. It is rare, I have to say, but we've had experiences of this with our members, as we have with clients really trying to just do things incorrectly and hide a few invoices so they don't have to pay the VAT, or create a few invoices because they want to pay themselves more salary, and all sorts of things like this. You just look at it carefully and diligently and make sure that you really know what that business is all about. And 99.9% of businesses, of all businesses, are genuine people. Even if they try and pull a fast one every now and then, you pull them in, you tell them they can't do that, and as long as they continue to play the game properly, then that's okay. It's the out-and-out crooks you have to be careful of. Anonymous has said, with regard to the coronavirus support from HMRC, if you receive information that a client's accountant, here we go, to whom you have no connection, is giving possible fraudulent information, does this need to be reported? If so, how is this action and to who? Steve, we are getting a lot of this at the moment. Accountants are just, and I must stress, it is a small number of accountants, but yeah, we do get this a lot. Accountants they seem to be slightly easier with what I would call out-and-out fiddles.
Yeah.
But we put in a SAR, don't we? That's it.
Yeah, we can put SAR in, but we can also, depending on the circumstances, we can also work with the professional body who supervises the accountant. So it could be a double whammy. There could be, the police look at them, but also the professional body could be looking at them as well. So, depending on the circumstances, we could share with the professional body. I mean, if the member has knowledge or suspicion that the accountant is money laundering, they should be submitting a SAR in their own right.
But I think the main thing is talk it through with ICB. Don't feel alone in this. Don't feel you've got to make this decision by yourself and sit there worrying about it for the next 6 months or something or other. Talk it through. We've got inspectors who can talk to you, Steve, Jayne. They'll give you their professional view of what this really looks like and feels like. You could have totally overreacted. You might have a point, in which case they'll explain the best route for you to take.
Yeah, we take these phone calls pretty regularly, Garry. We get phone calls from members with those particular circumstances, and we can talk through, discuss it, and, give advice. It's their decision at the end of the day. It's the member's decision. It's their suspicion or knowledge. But we can advise them what we would do under the circumstances, so to guide them in the right direction.
Yeah. Anonymous again here. I have been updating my client photo ID, and one elderly client no longer has a photo ID, as does not have a passport and has surrendered his driving license. What document do I need to ask him for?
Have we got some, is there any official documents from HMRC, from DWP in relation to his pension that would sort of indicate the reason he says he is? You could also, if you can't get any documentation, you could also consider doing electronic verification. The 5th directive now allows for electronic verification to be taken, so that's another option. But like I said,
Yeah, I mean, if he's that old, he'll be getting a pension, in which case he'll have a gateway.
Yeah.
Get some more information about that, and if it's gone through the gateway and they think he's okay, then I think we're pretty certain that it is. Just make sure it is the right person. You get the right gateway. Don't make any mistakes with that. Can we rely on ICB's practice member listing for due diligence under MLR? And why is their letterhead enough to confirm their AML due diligence compliance?
Regulation 39 of MLR allows for reliance on other professionals, provided they are supervised for AML purposes. You've got to come up with an agreement with the person you're going to rely on, that they will provide all copy documents should you need to see them. They'll supply them immediately. But at the end of the day, although you're relying on their CDD, you're still ultimate responsible for it yourself. And if it all goes pear-shaped and they've done it wrong, you're still responsible. So, you can rely. You've still got to make sure, that the person you're relying on has done it properly in the first place themselves.
Yeah. I've got one here from Claire Allen. I get very nervous when I come across non-ICB members who are acting as freelance bookkeepers but appear not to be licensed for AML. Is there a central list somewhere, maybe with HMRC, that I can go to check these individuals out, or is there somewhere I can report them? Steve, this is what we do all the time, isn't it?
Yep, HMRC. There is there's a register, an online register with HMRC where you can search to see if the people are registered with HMRC. And if they're not, you can report them to HMRC. They've got a team called the Policing the Perimeter team. They're actively looking for unregistered, unlicensed, unsupervised accountancy professionals, and they will take action against any of these people. We've got a gateway address where we can refer things in. And it's generally speaking, you'll find that HMRC, they're the default supervisor. And many of these people won't be members of professional bodies, so they would fall under HMRC remit. So you can search. It's not the best search engine in the world, and they are looking at redoing it at the moment. If you've got suspicions and you can't find out yourself, pass them through to us through professional standards.
Yeah.
We will have a look at them, and if we think they're trading unsupervised, we will pass it on to HMRC for action.
I think it's probably best that they do that, and we will take that forward, because I think we've got a few more avenues. The SIS scheme that we've got now with the FCA and all that sort of stuff. So, yeah, let us know if you've got some sort of suspicion. And the other thing is that I have to say, one or two of our members have been caught out recently by employing people as freelancers without checking out that they are indeed supervised by somebody. So, that's not good. You have the right, well, not only the right, you have the legal obligation to ask them with who they are supervised by. That's protecting you and covering your back. You need to make sure of that. But don't just ask them and take what they say. Have some proof that they've got an up-to-date certificate from somebody. It must be from a regulated supervisor. And, there's a list of those on the legislation. It's the obvious ones, ICAWA, CCA, us, etc., etc. Don't take any of these very strange organisations. We had one recently. A lady took a person on the merit of a certificate from an Indian organisation. No, it's UK. That's what it's about. It's those that are listed under the MLR regulations. So yes, Claire, I know this has been an ongoing thing for many, many years. Quite often, when we do our research, we find that they are supervised by somebody. But if you've got those sort of suspicions, it's probably because you don't think they're a particularly good bookkeeper anyway. Which again, it puts them onto our radar, and then we can follow it up. From memory, there's a question, says Garry, on the online AML question, which asks, to the best of your knowledge, has your client been convicted of a criminal activity? Does this mean I should be paying for criminal record checks to be carried out on all clients?
No. Now, to your knowledge, that means you don't have to go digging. You might want to do a Google search, you might want to do a bit of background, but no, we're not asking for you to do a DBS. All we're asking you to do is use a bit of common sense and, look at the client. Do you really know them? What do you know about them? Is there anything that indicates that they are convicted criminals? And, I've had ICB members ring me and say, well, I've got a convicted fraudster. I know he's convicted, but I'd sooner deal with him myself and deal with him properly than send him to another ICB member who doesn't know his background. So, you know, people do have criminal clients, but so long as you deal with them properly with a good, you know, enhanced due diligence and make sure everything that do is squeaky clean, you know, you can still take these people on. But, you know, we're not expecting you to do DBS checks.
We have a smiley face from Karen, so she must be happy with what we've told her. Claire Allen says, Liz, that's what branch meetings are for. Agreed. I mean, branch meetings are there as a resource, and nowadays you don't even have to get in your car and drive on a dark night to go to one. You can pick up a branch meeting, hopefully locally, because then you've got people around you who know what's going on in your local area, and that's good. But if one of the other branches has got a particularly interesting meeting, then you can just log in. So, you know, as we found with the Oxfordshire and Tyne and Wear members today, they've joined together for a meeting. So, Hi says, Nikki Hagenby, under AML, I'm a bit unsure about one of the new questions relating to transaction risk. Are any fees paid in cash? What type of fee does this relate to? That's to both parties. Does your client accept fees from his customers, or do you accept fees from your clients? It works both ways. Yeah, but it's a check, isn't it? So if you're working in a sweet shop, the chances are it's all going to be cash. You know, that's the way of life. But it's really people who are taking lots of cash, and you then have to question whether it's all going into the records. Yeah. Yeah, but it looks at, you know, the fees, or the fees paid from your customer, from their customers, so to speak, your client's customers, and are you accepting fees from your client? So it works both ways. That's the question I've been asked in the past. Is it relation to my clients and me, or from my client and their customers? So it's all ends, all ways. Helen says, I've watched the ML presentations, and with the examples of fraud are very high level. Can you give some more localized examples and low level examples? Helen, yeah, we do this on quite a regular basis. I know I personally have always given examples of how our members have come up with things that are wrong and how they pick things up or what have you. I take your point. I think we can probably we can analyze them a little bit, but put some of those onto the website. I think, Steve, that might be a good idea, because the stuff that comes from the NCA, National Crime Agency, does tend to be multi-million-pound drug frauds. It's not always down to our level, is it? No, and that's something that we're trying to get law enforcement to share with us. We're asking for case studies where accountants have facilitated money laundering, albeit unwitting or naively, looking at the red flags, looking at the things that the accountant or the bookkeeper might have seen in that particular business relationship. That's what we're looking for law enforcement to provide us. And I think that when we go to Summit this year, instead of standing up and doing this is Regulation 6 and this is Regulation 17, you must do a risk assessment, we're going to try and do some kind of a case study which we can talk to members about, talk to people in the audience about, and ask questions. Right, you've got this situation, what would you do here? What would you do next? What are your considerations? And try and work through something which gets people thinking about it, rather than us just stood there spouting regulations and you've got to do a risk assessment, you've got to do this, and you've got to do that. So that's something we're looking to build on. I think with the presentations at Inspire last year and last year's Summit and this year's Inspire and the branch meeting we're doing at the moment, talking about, you know, the regulations and what's required. I think going forward, we need to bring the more practical element to this, and hopefully engage members with, you know, with particular problems and how they can solve them and what to look for and what the red flags are. So that's what we're looking to do in future. Lucy Brown has just said, yes, it is the links, Lucy. The branch networks are perfect for asking others and working out best practice. And the Donald has come back in and said, thank you, I take the point about branch meetings, but some people are far too away to get into any of the existing branch meetings. Well, at the moment, you can get as far as you like to a branch meeting. It doesn't matter that it's in a different part of the country. Look on the website, it will list them all. You just go straight in and you can go anywhere. It might be different moving forward, but then we put pressure on your local branch to make sure they give you good stuff. And money laundering now actually must be covered by a branch at least once a year. That's one of the new rules that's come out, and actually the branch chairs are very keen to do it because it's a very, very popular subject. Karen, it would be really good to have Steve or someone go through a SAR form with us on a Zoom perhaps. so we have an idea of what sort of things we need to report and what form process looks like. Sorry if I'm asking too many questions. Thanks for your explanations, Karen. We love you asking questions. That's not a problem. Steve, there is some information how to fill in a SAR, but I think they like the look of you doing it rather than somebody from HMRC, perhaps.
Yeah, well, I actually worked at the UKFIU, as you know, for 7 years, 8 years almost. So that was my job, going around telling people how to submit SARs and what to put in a SAR. Yeah, we can do a webinar on that, no problem.
Right, great. We'll do that. We'll get that up online, and then it can be downloaded. That'd be fantastic. Elaine Birchley, when a client dies, how long do you have to keep records for them, and do we need to report them on the AML online until we no longer have to hold their records?
Yeah, record keeping, Garry, it's 5 years after the end of the business relationship. So it's 5 years after death if there's still a current client. You've got to keep all the CDD documentation for a minimum of 5 years.
Yeah, so you can put that they're dormant, but you just keep an eye on things, and that is for tax reasons, because they can have an inspection, or the people that are left behind, unfortunately, can have a tax inspection of the business entity for up to 5 years.
It's purely money laundering, Garry. That's basic. This is
Right.
in relation to your CDD documentation.
Yeah.
You've got to keep it for 5 years. Tax records, I'm not sure, they might be 6 years. I think that might be different. But certainly, you're looking at copy passports and driving licenses and that sort of thing. They've got to be kept a minimum of 5 years from the end of the business relationship.
Yeah, so that includes people who decide to go elsewhere or give up business or whatever. So it's not
Absolutely.
just people who unfortunately pass away.
Absolutely, yeah.
Was the Oxford Tyne and Wear branch meeting recorded so we can watch it? No, Helen, I'm afraid I don't think it was. I will check that out. We don't know. Actually, I'll check, because with it being on Zoom, somebody might have remembered to press the record button, in which case, yeah, we'll let you know. So we'll post that somewhere, and we'll follow that up. Kirsty St. John says, great case studies, great idea. I'm hoping to do a joint AML with Lucy Brown. Right, okay, we'll come up with some case studies. I mean, we've got lots of them, actually. So yeah, we can certainly do that for you. So that's gone down. Let's just see, we've got, now we're on there. So great. So I think we've got through the question. Now, I've got some questions that, because we've been stacking up a bit here, we've got some coming through. Now, first of all, to point out, we open our webinars out to people who are not just members. So we've got other people coming in from externally. We have a couple of people on today who are new to us. If you're one of these, if you are practicing at the moment and you've suddenly realised that you should have a practice, the authority to run a practice, and you don't have a supervisor, please let us know. We will work with you on that. We have one of our former members on today as well. I won't give you names or anything else. You'll know who you are. But I think you've been away for about 5 years. Now, either you are still in practice and you're not supervised, or you just think that our CPD and our television is better than your current supervisor and you've joined us, in which case, great, fantastic, but why don't you come back and join us anyway? Because we get even more if you remember. So what else have we got here? Yeah, I think we get a lot of feedback from it. I've had a few members now apparently sending in emails saying, whilst we're on there, saying they think our members are terrible if they use unqualified and unregistered bookkeepers. I agree, and we are trying to crack down on that, and it's one of the things that Jayne will be following up when she rings people. You know, who are they with? Who do you know them? You know, how do you know them? And somebody says, look, this is a regular thing. Every time I run one of my branches, I've got people there who say they've taken somebody on. When we're made to jump through hoops to become not just a bookkeeper, but an IC bookkeeper, why are we so stupid that we then employ somebody who doesn't know what they're doing? Very good question. Very good question. I really don't have the answer to that. So we are, where are we? Oh, come on, 20 past. We've been on for an hour and a half now, nearly. So I think we ought to be wrapping this up. Jayne, if I can come to you, just go over again the key points that you're looking for when you are doing your daily ritual of just randomly picking people from the database to try and see make sure that they're okay. Just give me a list of the things you're looking for.
Okay, so AML online, are all your customers on there? Is all your information that we hold about you, is it all up to date? Have we got all your staff? Have we got all your directors, have we got DBS for all your officers of your company? Do we know your current address? Do we know your current phone number? Do we know about your website? Are you using the ICB crest correctly on your website? There is guidance about that on the ICB website as well. Those are the basic things. Oh, the TCSP register as well. Make sure if you're doing that sort of work that we know about it.
Photographic ID?
Yeah, the photographic ID now is part of the practice license application. So the newer members, we do have most of your ID. The older members, not the older members, but the members that have been with us for a number of years, I don't think it was part of the practice license application. So quite a lot of those members are getting emails asking to, requesting that you send in valid photographic ID through to member services.
Yeah, actually, we're going to extend that to all members, even if they're not in practice. And also the DBS, the need for DBS is going to be extended to members not in practice as well. And we have to do something about students, because obviously students who've got a problem that we don't know about, so they might have a DBS that highlights a problem when they become a member, have gone through a year's worth of training only to be told actually you can't now become a member. So to help them out, we are looking at ways of covering that when we first start. So there are quite a few changes coming up. As I said before, it's a bit of a learning curve. We're moving around a lot, and just trying to come up with better ideas all the time. If you've got any problems at all, you know, like somebody said today, they want stories that are about real bookkeepers that we can talk about. They want to find out how to get to the relevant bits of information. It's by telling us that you need that we can then react, because we are pretty good at reacting, I think. And therefore, if we know that something is wanted, we will try and do something about it. And I think we're pretty good on that. Mike, what about you? What would you say? What would you like to see when you go out and see your inspections in the future?
I'll double check everything that Jayne's told you, but the main thing is that you can explain to me who your client is, what their business activity is, and who's behind the business and who's pulling the strings. I'm finding that a lot of the time, a lot of members won't fully understand what the business activities are of a client. Also, that they've got the whole of practice risk assessment and the policy and procedures statement not only completed, but they actually understand it. A lot of the time people will fill it in, it's a pro forma, fill it in, I've done that, I've signed it, well, explain it to me, and they don't really understand it. So it's understanding the reason for it, and also understanding their business activities.
Yeah, I mean, that whole practice risk assessment, Steve, as well, that's something that is relatively new, came in early this year, is it? I get my years mixed up with this lockdown. And it's a difficult one to do, isn't it? You're a single person running your own practice, and you're supposed to do a risk assessment on yourself, but it is now required by law. So, but all the templates are there for people to work through.
Yeah, Regulation 18, not to be quoting regulations, but Regulation 18 says you must do a assess the risks that your practice, money laundering risk that your practice faces. Now, you've got to do your client risk. You do that by doing AML online. So that's done for you, basically. Then you look at geographic, you look at your services, your transactions, your delivery channels. It's pretty straightforward. There's a template there for you to use on the website. And there's also a sample template, one that we wrote. Just gives you the basic idea of what you need to put into a risk assessment. You know, it's not rocket science, it's pretty straightforward. But, you know, look at the template, look at the sample, and have a go at it. And if we come out and we do an inspection, the inspector will sit down, look at your risk assessment and tell you if you're wrong or you're right. You know, if you've got any problems, email it into me, I'll have a look at it and see what I think. But, you know, it's something that's a requirement, you know, and you must do it.
We have actually got one question here, which I will just mention just before we close, and this is from Gina saying, you've just mentioned records relating to due diligence must be kept for 5 years from the end of the client relationship. What happens when with a charity when one of the trustee resigns? Given that I still have a working relationship with the charity, should I keep the personal data of that trustee?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. A lot of people worry about GDPR, and you have to be careful how you hold data. But if it's related to money laundering regulations, if you're required to keep it to prove something or to do your due diligence, you're allowed to keep that data. At the end of that period, then you have to dispose of it properly. But you do need to keep that data. Even if you have nothing more to do with that person for the time being, you need to hang on to it. So I think that's pretty fair. Well, thank you guys. Particularly to Mike. You know, you've had sort of what 3.5, 4 hours of this today, but never mind. I'd just like to say to everybody listening, you know, we are here to help. We are here to provide guidance, and you know, talk to us. If you've done something wrong, just pass it over. Let's talk about it. Let's get it sorted out. Let's make sure that the information is correct. And if you've put your husband, your wife, or your kids, or your dog onto the list of booms or something or other, you know, tell us now before we find out on a search and you get into trouble. You know, let's just make sure that, you know, next time Steve is in the Treasury or in the Home Office or something, we can actually hold our hand on our hearts and really say, you know, we're not just bookkeepers, we're ICB bookkeepers, and that really means what we're saying. So thank you very much, everybody. We will see you again, and I hope you enjoy this, whether you're seeing it this hot afternoon or reading this later on today. See you all again soon. Thank you, everybody. Cheers.
Yes, thank you.
Bye.
Bye.